Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
Welcome to Plain Talk, and today I don't I make a joke. Chad's not here to laugh at it either. I am always forgetting to introduce Chad at the beginning of the show, and Chad's not here today. It's just me and a guest. So I have I'm introducing Chad without him even being here. So I hope you all appreciate that. Doing my job as the host, trying to do it right. We have a guest today, Tom Campbell, who was a guest not that long ago, but when he was the guest previously, he was running for a different office. He was running for governor, but then, last week we had a wild week in North Dakota politics. We saw former state representative Rick Becker launch a primary challenge against Congressman Kelly Armstrong in the U.S. House race, but then Governor Doug Burgum announced he wasn't seeking a third term, which prompted Kelly Armstrong to jump into the governor's race, which in turn prompted Tom Campbell to jump into the House race. And Tom is my guest today. Tom, how are you?
Hey, Rob.
Yeah, happy to have you on. I was wondering, walk us through the decision-making process. I spoke with you. You called me when you made the decision and said that you were going to be running and decided that the governor's to leave the governor's race and to jump into the House race. You said at the time, you were kind of looking. You didn't want to get into a slugfest with Kelly Armstrong. You expressed your support, and admiration for him, and decided that the House race. But walk us through maybe a little more fulsomely that decision-making process.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it would have got probably a little nasty. It would have got very expensive. The people don't want that. One person told me the only person that wins in that is the media, you guys, yeah. Which is probably half true. And Kelly and I, we talked. We said, the people. I'm a man of the people. I've always have been. And the House of Representatives is the people's house. They run every 2 years. The Senate's every 6 years. So the House of Representatives people have to get out with the people. And I'm good at that. I enjoy that. So that's basically one of the reasons. We're going to combine our energy to work together. Him as governor and me as the House. Mike Johnson, the speaker, he knows pretty well. He's going to try to get a conference call with us together to see if I can be on the ag committee. Ag and energy is what I'm looking to do. He said, probably with my experience, that I could probably get on that committee. That'd be great for North Dakota. I think the farm bill is up, and that's always a huge challenge. So that just basically just made common sense. A lot of my constituents and people talk to me. They said, hey, we don't want to watch this fight. We're tired of politics. The presidential election goes on for 2 years and billions of dollars, and the debates are it's a laugh. So. And I agree to them. Let's just make it simple and switch.
Now, you say you wanted to avoid a fight with Kelly Armstrong, and we're going to see this week. I have a feeling that Lieutenant Governor Tammy Miller is going to get into that gubernatorial race. So we're probably going to see a very sporty competition there anyway. But in the House race, there is another candidate. I mean, Rick Becker has announced that he's running for the House of Representatives. So far, the only announced candidates are you two. There may be more. Tax Commissioner Brian Kraushus is thinking about getting in. Public Service Commissioner Julie Fedorchak told me yesterday she's thinking about getting in. But for right now, it's you and Rick Becker. You don't expect that race with him to be competitive in the same way that it would have been with Armstrong?
I think in a different format. I know Rick. I was in the legislature, Rick. I was with Kelly as well. No, without a doubt, it's going to be a challenge and never take anybody lightly. But and we share a lot of the same issues. We're not like extreme left or right. I'm going to approach it a little differently. I'm very concerned, as he is, with the future of our state and our country. We can't continue to sustain this. My grandkids and kids, I'm concerned. My son goes, "Gosh, this $34 trillion is insane, and it's growing. A $1.7 trillion deficit each year, Rob, and that's going to balloon more as this $34 trillion debt. A lot of the debt that was at 0 and 1% that's coming due is rewritten at higher rates. That of course, because the interest rates have gone up. That concerns me. We're spending about $750 to $800 billion a year just on interest. They said within a year that could be $1 trillion on interest a year every year, plus the 1.7 trillion. It's insane what's going on. None of us, you don't run your house budget like that. Neither do I. And it's got to stop. And I have some answers to that. Everybody says, okay, yeah, I heard this, politicians promising, blah, 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 the deficit and everything. But I have an approach that to fix this, not to destroy it or to overhaul it, but to fix this. It took many years for us to get this way. The pendulum swung too far, and I think it's going to take a few years to get out of this. You don't fix this overnight. If you went to a balanced budget immediately, that would cut $1.7 trillion immediately. I think that alone would trigger recession, maybe depression. You can't do that. There's a lot of people that depend on our programs. North Dakota gets way more money coming back from Washington D.C. as dollar transfers than we send to it. Call it whatever you want, but that's just the way the system. If we took a route as my opponent probably would, you're going to destroy and hurt a lot of people immediately, and I don't want to do that. I've got another rational way of approaching that, and I don't know if we can share that today or not, but I've got some great ideas that I'd like to, just common sense ideas that we could approach this with.
Well, let's get into that. Because the national debt seems intractable. And I think a lot of it is rooted in, frankly, some mixed signals that our political leaders get from voters at times, where we want low taxes, but we also don't seem to find meaningful budget cuts to be all that palatable, right? They're not politically popular, which is why I think a lot of the politicians in Washington, D.C. react to that by giving the voters what they want, which is low taxes and lots of spending. So what is the solution? How do we put ourselves on a trajectory? What's the Tom Campbell plan for getting ourselves on a trajectory to a balanced budget?
First of all, I want to try to have a report. I was accused by Rick a couple of days ago, and don't get me wrong, Rick and I know each other. We worked together in Bismarck, and we actually ran against each other for kind of a pre-campaign against the governor way back for the governor, and we ran into each other. So Rick said, that's one thing about Rick. I think we'll have fun with it, with our opposing ideas and stuff. And like I said, we share a lot of the fundamental core values. It's just how different approaches to get there. But number one, I think the largest issue is we got to stop the omnibus bill. You saw it in Bismarck, where the Supreme Court brought him back. In essence, the same thing, the big budget bill, same thing as omnibus. When you put everything in one thing, got to stop that. It's just a common sense thing. Senator Kramer and Hoeven, they voted for it, and Kelly Armstrong didn't. And it's not that I don't want infrastructure and things brought back to North Dakota, but everything should stand on its own. Every budget cut. And other than packing things in with pork, come on. That'd be like a freshman in college, just giving them an open credit card and say, here, figure it out yourself. You can't do that. It's interesting. And I got to get the name. I have a paragraph quoted somewhere where a guy quoted this. This was 2 years before 1776, before our Constitution was written. And it said something about a true democracy will never sustain itself. It'll always, the minute the people realize that their elected politician can bring back money for votes and they want to get reelected, it's the beginning of the end. And you swear that somebody wrote that just like a year or two ago, but this was written 2 years, 1774. And I'll send it to you, but it's interesting. And I'm sure you've heard that a democracy eventually will fail. And I don't want that to happen. And, but the omnibus bill is a huge one for room for cut and hold people more accountable on it. It just basically no new spending. Yeah. Period. No new hires. No new hires. Let's use artificial intelligence and the technology and the robots that we have. We should be able to, we've trimmed labor in our businesses because of the modernized technology. Let's use it in our government. I think we could cut half the government jobs that people are working at home, probably not as efficient as they could be. Some other things, stop paying illegal immigrants. I think they're getting, don't quote me on this, but roughly a couple $1,000 a month. And we need immigrants, but they need to come through the door legally. And we've got all kinds of places. There's employers that'll give them jobs and they can start paying taxes. And I got a whole nother idea for housing. We can get affordable housing. I think I mentioned that to you before too. So there's some ideas. And the housing issue is, there's employers that need people. There's, North Dakota is short up to 45,000 jobs. There's like 10 million, I think, in the country. But so there's 45,000 employers right now that need people. You know that. And one of the biggest issues is housing. Well, I can change the H-2A is the temporary 9-month for agriculture workers, which we have. That's a good program, but we need to expand that. And there's the H-1B, where for business people, it's limited to 4-year degree, and there's only 170,000, I think, in the country. Very simply to eliminate that 4-year degree, so it's open to anybody that needs jobs, construction people, farmers. It's year-round. Bring the families in, have them, hardworking families can adopt to our culture, pay taxes, and be here permanently. There's a lot of people from different countries that would love to do that, and it can be that simple. I think people just need to be educated of a shortage there is of labor throughout the country, not just North Dakota. Every state has a shortage.
Tom, I want to focus on something you said just a moment ago, which is sort of part, instead of having the massive omnibus legislation where it becomes like what, I mean, in the North Dakota legislature, they called the OMB budget the Christmas tree, right? Because everybody would kind of pack hang their special project ornament on the Christmas tree. In Congress, they certainly do that. They package all the spending together, and your choice is, if I don't like the spending, I have to vote against this large bill that might have a lot of things in it that I think are really important. But then I vote for it, and I end up passing this spending that I think is wasteful or that I oppose. That does create dilemmas that I think are hard. But what would you say in another context? For instance, I know that you kind of, when we spoke previously, you took a shot at Representative Becker about the Farm Bill. You said a couple of my explaining your decision to jump into the House race, you said a couple of my agricultural friends were frustrated that Kelly left the House and went to the governorship, and they're concerned about Rick Becker being the congressman, being against the Farm Bill and so forth. And the Farm Bill is an example of kind of a compromise, because on one hand, you have a lot of rural state elected representatives, like our congressional delegation, having to cut deals with a bunch of urban members of Congress who are from the coasts or from, not sort of agrarian areas like ours is. And they have to cut a deal. I mean, one of the reasons why food stamps is in the agricultural bill is it's because that's the trade-off. So how do you, I mean, it's a nice idea that we're going to, take an up or down vote on all these different packages. But on the other hand, Republicans, we often have a divided government. So how do we get Democrats on board with voting for something like the Farm Bill without giving them something in return?
Well, I think I've always been a big compromiser. Thomas Jefferson, the great compromise. President Reagan and Tip O'Neill. I don't know if you ever read that book. They were on the cover. They were opposing parties, and they battled out during the day, but at night they went out and had dinner and drinks together, and they worked together. Senator Mark Andrews did the same thing. I interviewed him when I was running for the United States Senate 6 years ago, and he said the same thing. What's changed nowadays, he says, in Washington is, he said, I used to battle it out during the day, same thing as Reagan, and he said, we'd go out and have drinks and dinner. We were buddies at night. We appreciated the differences of approaches, but yet we were still friends. You don't have that anymore in Washington, D.C. Each side is ready to kill each other, and you have to compromise because it's split. Our country is almost split 50-50, give or take. So to answer your question on the Farm Bill, when I traveled around the state when I was running and when I was state senator, I found out that majority, not all, but majority of the farmers, and I'm a farmer myself, and I agree with them, they said there is room to trim a little bit of fat on the Farm Bill, especially the last few years. We got a lot of checks with the COVID stuff that probably most of the people didn't need. But far overwhelmingly, most of them said they want to keep the crop insurance program. And I think, so that would be my compromise. And I'm a farmer. I know some of the specifics of it. Been there, done that what we could kind of compromise. And the rest of the food, and you're right, the whole the SNAP and the food program. It's the farm program. We wouldn't have a farm bill if it wasn't for that attached to it with the urban versus the rural. So we have to be cautious on that because we don't ever want to lose that ability to compromise with that. So I think and most farmers, we've come off some not too bad years with commodity prices, even though they've come down somewhat. And it's a safety net for when we have huge years of drought or the two uncontrollable factors, the markets and the weather. That's what the farm bill is for. And we still have the cheapest food policy in the world, Rob. I think it's less than 10%. So, anybody that's, and I'm not just picking at you, but I can't tell it to anybody and myself, until you stop having three meals a day, don't cry, don't complain too much.
Yeah.
My opponent is strong opposed of, farm subsidies. And I think a lot of the subsidies and to me, if that's the case, does he want to do away with the Bank of North Dakota, our state mill, federally approached water projects that bring millions of dollars to North Dakota? Does he want to bankrupt our small towns with no farm program? Power cooperatives, if there's a storm, ice storm, a lot of federal money fixes that. Federal disasters, Doug Burgum's just asking right now for the ICEs. Do we want to eliminate that? There's just so many things that I'm not necessarily for, but that's what we become dependent on. There's a lot of elderly and people in every ages that depend on that. And we can't destroy that. We got to try to fix it. And I'm here to bring not so much a bull in a china cabinet, but a person that can fix it rationally and sit down and discuss this. That's just my approach.
Talk a little bit more about why, and again, understanding there may be other people that get into this race. Although, the timeline for this is short. The NDGOP state convention is, just a little more than 60 days away. So, this race is going to move fast.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess maybe I should ask you that question right now. Are you plan? There's always the question of, are you going to seek the endorsement at the state convention? If you do and you don't receive the endorsement there, will you carry on to the June primary?
Yes and yes. I'm going to kind of wait to see who is all running and stuff. But I'm planning on. I get along good at the GOP, the leaders and stuff, and I'm planning on. Tentatively, I'm not going to 100% guarantee that right now, but I'm planning on leaning toward that route. I spoke my first.
Well, you say not 100% leaning towards that route. Is that going to the convention? Is that what you're talking about?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Sure. Yeah. And I went to my first Jamestown District 12 last night and spoke, and I had a blast. I probably knew half the people from years before, and I shook everybody's hand, and it was huge support. I think I got 99% of the support there. Two guys were ready to write a check out to me. I love that. It's kind of fun. I haven't done this now for quite a few years, so I'm looking forward to tonight. I'm leaving right after we get done to go to Bismarck to go to the District 47 convention in Bismarck. So I'm going to be busy. And you're right. It's going to go fast. It's going to be the thing before the April done, and then of course the primaries in June 11th. So it's going to be 4 months of intense campaigning. But I like that. Jeff Gordon always said. Somebody asked him, do you like to race? And he goes, "Well, I don't really like to race so much, but I love to win. But I love to race and I love to campaign and I like to win. So it's a win-win deal for me. It's fun just being out with the people. So I love to do."
We have a little bit of an unusual situation in that Becker is seeking the NDGOP nomination one cycle after he previously ran as an independent against incumbent Senator John Hoeven in the general election in 2022. He had started that election cycle as a Republican. He campaigned for the NDGOP convention endorsement that spring. He lost to Hoeven. He skipped the June primary, and then he entered the general election as an independent. Now, the NDGOP has a rule that says that if you have run for office as the candidate of another party or as an independent, you are barred, and I think it's for 6 years, from seeking the NDGOP convention endorsement. Do you think that rule should be changed for Representative Becker, or do you agree with that rule?
I had nothing to do with the rule, but it was done for a reason, because the Republican Party or the Democratic Party would probably agree that you want to have loyal people that stick to your party. And I think there was a reason, why he went the independent route, because Hoeven crushed him in the primary. I think Becker only had 15 or 18% support. And there's a reason for that. He's just too radical far right. So many people. Last night, it was overwhelmingly people are going to support me because they don't like the approach that Rick Becker has. They like the end game in essence, but you can't. He commented on, I think it was somebody's program where that I was a photo op guy. He went back a couple of years and looked at my social media, and he said that Tom Campbell's just a photo op guy. And I go, that's true. The last couple, 2 or 3 years, I was a photo op guy. I'm a people person. I'm out there, but Democrats, Republicans, all young, middle, old age, everybody. And I wasn't running for anything in the last 2 or 3 years. But back up to when I was in the state Senate, I not only did photo ops, but I also was one of the few people that had a weekly newsletter, and I did photo pictures of my opposition, different bills and everything. So, I think that backfired on him. Absolutely, I'm a photo op guy because I'm a man of the people on both sides, and I will address this in Washington, D.C. I'll take a lot of pictures of my opposition and the challenging, controversial political issues that come to like.
Well, on one hand, I guess you could say, somebody's a photo. On one hand, we could say somebody's a photo op guy.
I'm not going to run from it.
But on the other hand,
we're against this, and I'm going to make sure that my.
We got a little bit of a lag on the line, but on one hand, I guess you could say, someone's a photo op person. On the other hand, you could say you invested a lot of time in supporting other candidates for office. You support a lot of time meeting with groups and going out. I don't know. That seems like just politics to me. Like that's how you play the game. You build networks of support. You go out, you talk to people, you talk to different groups, and you listen to them. I don't know what else there is to the job other than, eventually if you get elected, casting votes. But that's how it's supposed to work. In your mind, if this House race, maybe it's you versus Becker, maybe it's you and one or two other people versus Becker. I mean, however this turns out, whoever ends up in this race, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Not that you're all going to gang up on Becker, but my point is there's going to be maybe more than just the two of you in this race. Ideally, what would you like this race to be about? I mean, for you to feel like, this was a good, meaningful competition that served the people of North Dakota well. What does that campaign look like for you? What are all the candidates talking about?
Well, some of those items I indicated, the things that we can't sustain. The federal deficit is a huge deal. The debt I hear all the time. Open borders right now. That's probably, I think, for the younger generation. I think it's climate change is number one, but the close number two is the open borders, the drugs that are coming in. It's kind of out of control. The amount of money we spend on the illegals coming in is ridiculous. Yeah. We want immigrants. We want people coming in our state, but they need to come to. I would say I support the wall, build a wall, but also put big doors in it so immigrants can come in legally because we need them. We need 10 million.
Yeah.
So
I love that. A lot of people don't realize about the American birth rate. If you look at Americans, our birth rate is below replacement level, which means that but for immigration, the American population would be shrinking. And also, I'm the child of immigrants. I'm certain that you're the child of immigrants.
Yes,
I mean,
I am.
I like that tradition of people coming and finding prosperity and sanctuary in our country. So let me ask you that, since you brought it up, and I only have a few minutes left with you. There's obviously a lot of controversy around a border bill in Congress right now. We don't have a lot of details. Mm-hmm. I was just watching an interview with Senator Kramer, and he was making the point. There's all these people saying they're for or against this bill. We don't have a bill yet. But we do have some broad strokes of what it is. What do you make of all that controversy? Where would you be at on that budget bill? Because we have sort of Donald Trump and some others saying, this is amnesty, this is terrible, don't do this. And also the suggestion that let's leave this as a problem so that Donald Trump can solve it if he gets elected president in 2024, versus people, and Senator Kramer said this, saying, listen, we have to try to do something on the border. If we're saying this is a crisis, I'm paraphrasing here, but if we're saying that this is a crisis, we're obligated to do something about it. If you were in Congress right now, Tom, where would you be at on this?
Well, it is interesting because even Kramer admitted that Trump's going to probably kick the can down the road because he doesn't want Biden to get credit, which I will never do that. I will always vote for what's best for the people, not my future election or what my party or I will look like. So that, to me, I disagree with Trump on that. And if it's true or not, it's too bad. This is a big compromise on funding Ukraine, in essence. and it shouldn't be that way, that I'll give you this and that, but that's part of the compromise, which I said. I would probably support it. It's too bad because, they said they're limited to 5,000 people coming in. It should be 0 coming in to the Mexican border. And we kind of had this, not that Trump had the perfect solution, but, this thing changed day one when Biden came in office. I'm not picking on either one of them or bashing either one of them, but day one, when Biden came in the office, this changed, and he blind-eyed it for for a long, long time, and now we're seeing the consequences, and people are actually. Let's get back to some of the things that Trump did, or the prior administrations that had more of a normal border, where there was a border there.
Well, Tom, I appreciate you coming on. I look forward to talking to you more as this race unfolds. I'd even like to maybe get you on with some of the other candidates all at once and have a little bit of a forum on the podcast like we've done in election years past. I should say I have invited Rick Becker on the show, but he has so far declined to come on. So we'll see if that. I hope it changes. I'd like to talk with him. But anyway, I really appreciate your time coming on, Tom.
And I'm going to be one last plug here. I'm going to be visiting 244 cities in North Dakota during my campaign. That's every city that's 100 or more. So I'm going to be busy boy. I'll be out in your area a lot, and I'm going to be banging a lot of doors and listening to them. So nobody's going to outwork my love for North Dakota. So, hey, thanks, Rob. You're welcome anytime. Give me a holler, and I appreciate your time.
Well, look me up when you're in the Magic City. Look me up.
I will do that for sure.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Hi there, my name is James Wallner. I produce and host the podcast Dakota Spotlight, a true crime podcast that tackles historical and unsolved crimes in the upper Midwest. Follow along with me as we search for a missing girl, attempt to solve a 45-year-old murder, and much, much more. That's Dakota Spotlight Podcast, anywhere you get your podcasts, or at inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, just finished up our interview with Senator Tom Campbell. Going to switch gears here and talk about a legislative race. Now, I wrote about the endorsement process in District 30. Now, for those of you, I imagine that most people listening to this podcast understand how this process works in North Dakota. But for those of you who don't know, right now, the local district committees, so whatever legislative district you're living in, for instance, I live in District 5 in Minot. That legislative district is holding the political parties in your district are going to be holding what are called local conventions. And they get together and they endorse candidates. And the people who win at those conventions automatically get placed on the June ballot to get the nomination of their party. Now, anybody else who doesn't get that endorsement can just gather some signatures and place their name on that June ballot as well. But the convention is typically seen, it's an endorsement. It's an endorsement of the local party. Now, unfortunately, this process has been taken over by whatever you want to call them, the Bastiat caucus, the MAGA movement, the populists, sort of a group of activists who are a departure from what I would say are traditional North Dakota Republicans. And that's where they exercise their clout. They can, these conventions that often have, maybe just a few dozen people at them, they can get, if they get their people to these meetings, they can exercise influence over the process. Now in District 30, something unusual happened. And I thought it was interesting because we talk a lot about rigged elections. There's a lot of people investing time and effort into undermining confidence in our election system. And yet in District 30, what we have are three Republican candidates who are challenging the 3 Republican incumbents who are in that race currently. Now, the incumbents are State Representative Mike Nathe, who's my guest, State Representative Glenn Bosch, and Senator Diane Larson. The 3 challengers, included in their number, is Justice Amundsen, who just also happens to be the district chairman of District 30. And he was in charge of the convention where he was endorsed by the party at the convention that he ran. He's also in charge of selecting the district that he controls, gave him the authority to appoint the remaining delegates to the state convention. So this person is wielding a lot of control over the process that was supposed to be a fair and competitive process for endorsing the candidates in that district. And I thought it was interesting. I think it's emblematic of a lot of things going on nationally. I think it's emblematic of a lot of things going on locally. And I wanted to have State Representative Mike Nathe on to talk about that. Mike, thanks for coming on. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, for the invite. I appreciate it.
Walk us through why you and your fellow incumbents in District 30 opted to skip your own party's convention. You were censured for that, by the way, by the local district committee. Walk us through why did you make that decision?
Well, our party had gotten taken over a couple of years ago, and it was a very, very ugly scene. In fact, we had to have police there. We've had to have police at the last several of our meetings because it's gotten so ugly with the with the cussing and the interruptions and yelling point of order and then trying to challenge us and everything else. And we've had 3 or 4 of these meetings, and it's never ended well. It's gotten so bad that a lot of the good Republican supporters who have been supporters for many, many years now refuse to go because it is so disgusting, quite frankly. We were discussing this summer and this fall whether we wanted to go because we knew when we would go for the endorsement, we knew it was going to probably be another ugly scene. And it's hard to ask your supporters to go through that again. I think a lot of them have PTSD because they've been through some of these things. We had a meeting as an executive committee in December. You could say our side controls the executive committee. The chairman and people that think along his lines are maybe 5 out of the 18. It was a meeting that they were on Zoom. We were all together in a room. Things got heated, didn't go very well as kind of usually plays out with this crew. And he just shut the Zoom meeting off right in the middle of discussion. And we were discussing when to have this convention. We wanted it on the 24th. He wanted it on the 9th of January. He said he couldn't make the 24th. Very adamant that he couldn't make the 24th. So fast forward, Representative Bosch had gotten the room for the meeting on the 24th as they gave him instructions at our October meeting. We hadn't heard it then. So after the meeting, we hear nothing. We hear nothing about we hear nothing from the chairman. People had reached out to him. He doesn't return our emails or phone calls. So Representative Bosch said, "Hey, I haven't heard anything from this. I'm not going to pay the whole room. I don't know what's going on." So he went ahead and canceled it. We find out about a week or so later that he was now going to put an ad out and tell everybody that is when we're going to have the meeting is on the 24th of January. All of a sudden, he couldn't make it. So they had the meeting that night, but Representative Bosch, Senator Diane Larson, and I discussed it, and we just thought, you know what? We have 2 options here to get on the ballot. You could go through the district endorsement process, which we know will not be a good experience for anybody. It's just going to be ugly. Or the other road we could go down is get our signatures and go to the June primary. And we decided to do that, Rob, because as I said many times before, we would rather let the 16,000 people in our district decide who's on that ballot, not a small number of political people with a political agenda who's on that ballot. So we went out knocking on doors. We got our 160 some signatures and more. We got almost 600. Got almost 600 signatures. And I got to tell you, the reception at the door, the comments and the support for all 3 of us was just fantastic. The public is more aware of this stuff than I had figured. They are aware of kind of this group of people and what they're doing. That was very lifting our morale. So it was a good experience. So we got our signatures on there. We got them approved by the Secretary of State about 10 days ago. And we're getting all ready to go for the primary election in June. So we're going to start working hard here pretty soon.
Mike, one thing that concerns me about this process, and frankly, I think ought to be concerning to Republicans who obviously have an interest in electing Republican leaders to these various offices, whether it's the legislature or statewide or what have you. What concerns me is I'm looking at this district convention process where, you have local delegates show up and they pay party dues. Maybe they pay dues to their district if that's required. And then they vote. I'm very worried that these have become the people who are showing up. And like you said, I think there's a particular faction that is showing up and kind of driving everybody else away. I'm worried that because that's happening, both at the local level and frankly, if you look at the state convention, that there is a disconnect between those Republican activists who are showing up and the larger North Dakota electorate. and what they want, and that eventually that disconnect is going to result in Republicans putting candidates on the ballot that voters don't want. And this has been somewhat obscured because I think North Dakotans are very used to voting for Republicans. They have an idea about what the Republican brand is in North Dakota. For a lot of reasons, I think they see that brand as trustworthy. I mean, we have 30 years of really Republican dominance, Republican governors, Republican majorities in the legislature that have done a lot of good things. And I think there's a lot of reasons why North Dakota voters have come to trust that brand. What I'm worried is that because there's such a disconnect between the conventions and the voters, that the brand is going to be tarnished. And I look at a situation like yours, where we have a group of popular incumbents who don't even feel like they're welcome at their own convention anymore. And then I also look statewide, where we looked last cycle, where the state convention nearly gave the endorsement to Rick Becker, former state representative Rick Becker, over incumbent Senator John Hoeven, one of the most, successful, popular political leaders in North Dakota history, almost endorsed him. And yet we get to the general election ballot and Becker doesn't even get 20% of the vote. I mean, that to me speaks to a disconnect, and it troubles me. Does it trouble you?
Oh, absolutely. And it troubled me for many years, by the way. You may remember when I was the education chair back in 2013, that was my first experience with this group. And with the 2015 fight over Common Core and all these things, and everybody thought the sky was falling when it came to education, and it certainly didn't and haven't. And so I've been dealing with this group of people for quite some time now. My frustration is that the public wasn't at the time very aware of these people. So when they started getting involved in the districts and involved in the state party as a whole, they took over these endorsement processes and they took over these districts. And this district system was set up to bring in Republicans and help build the party, bring everybody in and listen to everybody. The problem with this group of people is it's got to be their way, 100% their way. There's no compromise. And even if you agree 80% with them, you're not with them. And so what that is doing is pushing out the good people. Quite frankly, you touched on it, the people that built this party, the people that helped put this state on the path that it's on, they want to get rid of all those people. They do not like what the party stands for or what you've done in the past. What they want, though, is to control that endorsement process on the state convention level and the district level, and then put the R behind their candidate. And like you say, the public's not all that involved in some of this. So when you get somebody of that ilk and he gets the R behind his name, boom, they're going to hit the R because they just assume that guy's been vetted and he's got to be good. Well, it's not, because the process has been corrupted in a way with them taking over. You're not getting everybody's feedback. You're getting one small group taking it over and then pushing their candidates and agenda. And that's why, Rob, I think you're going to see a lot more legislators like myself go to the June primary. I think you're going to see statewide candidates, most likely. Some, not all, but some may bypass the state convention and go to the June primary, like most states do. I think 40-some states have a primary system. They don't do what we do. And you know what? Again, I'd rather let the 16,000 people in my district decide whether I should be on the ballot or not 100 people who are at a convention. And I'll take my chances there. So,
well,
having the primary election for 2.5 months, Rob, where we're knocking on doors and we're trying to sell ourselves and compete with the other side is good. It gives the public an opportunity for them to vet and to make sure they know who they're voting for. Sometimes I think these district conventions, the public doesn't really fully know, and they've been trusting the party. I think I know those days are long gone as far as trusting the party endorsements. And you pointed it out with the state convention last time around with Hoeven. That's a perfect example. And that is also happening on the district level too.
One thing would you, when we've spoken previously, I mean, you've said if you're reelected, that you would pursue legislation to change this process. And what you need to understand is that although these political parties are private entities, these district conventions and things, these are spelled out in state law. These are spelled out in statute, like the timing and a lot of the process. You would take that out and just put everything on the June primary, which is to say the candidates who are interested in running, they gather their signatures, they put their names on the ballot. And then we don't have a convention. We just, everybody, Republicans vote on the Republican ballot. Democrats vote on the Democratic ballot. Libertarians, if they're around, they vote on the Libertarian ballot, and they decide the candidates in June, and then we vote on them in November. That's how you would like it to go.
Absolutely. And I have not been shy about that. And I've talked to a a lot of people about this idea. I mean, I had one office holder tell me no. Again, what is wrong with letting the overall general public decide who's on the ballot? I mean, we're all about transparency and openness, and I find it interesting that the other side, this group, all of a sudden want to just keep it to their people. They don't want everybody else in the district to know who's running. I'm all about let's get out there. So if you're running for governor all the way down to a legislator, you go get your 160 signatures or whatever the requirement is. You go meet the people in your district. You get their signature, tell them why you're running, and then get it certified, and away you go. And again, sell yourself to the district, to everybody in the district, not just to 100 angry people. And I think that's the best way to go. I think that's the best form of government. And as I said, the majority of the states in this country follow that same model. You could still have the state convention. You would have it maybe later in the summer. And I know there was discussions about that a couple of years ago. You can do all those things. That would be all after the fact, after the primary. But yeah, I'm all about opening up to everybody so that everybody has an equal chance to do their homework and vet that candidate and see who they really want to vote for. So they're a better informed voter. And I don't see what the harm is in that.
One, I think, rebuttal to that, and this is not necessarily me making this argument, but I think one area of concern that people would bring up is that if we just put everything on the June ballot, anybody can gather the signatures and put their name on the June ballot. In fact, I think a couple of years ago, the Democrats had, kind of a libertarian guy put his name on their ballot, and they very much did not like that person. But if that person had won, they could have been the Democratic nominee, even though they really had nothing to do with Democratic politics. Also, it's an open primary, which means, if you voted in it, you go to the polling place and you ask them which ballot you want, Republican or Democrat, and then they give it to you. We don't have voter registration in North Dakota. So are you concerned about that at all, about how open that is, where you could have people, Republicans crossing into the Democratic race or vice versa, to get up to tomfoolery? How do you feel about that, or how would you address those concerns?
I'm not worried about that at all. To do that sort of thing, Rob, you'd have to get a lot of people to switch their votes to pull something off like that. Again, I'm not worried about if you get, hey, we got 6 people for the House race or whatever. So be it. If they're Republican and they want to run, and they did the work and went out and got those 160 plus signatures, yes. You'd be surprised, though. A lot of people much rather go through the endorsement process because they do not want to go door to door. They do not want to tell them what they stand for. And that's why you see these people go for the district conventions. That's why they fight as hard as they have to grab control of those processes, because they don't want to have to go door to door. And they know the way it stands right now, if you put the R behind their name, there's a really good chance they're going to win, regardless of what their stances are. So I'm not worried about that at all. I mean, nothing's perfect, Rob. I mean, but that, in my mind, that's not a reason not to change this process.
Yeah, I mean, the R behind the name, I know people talk about that sort of pejoratively at times, saying, oh, people just vote for the letter. But, I mean, there's a reason why we have political parties. It's so that if somebody says they're a Republican, you have a pretty general, or at least traditionally, you had a pretty general idea of, where they were. Obviously, on the issues, they may diverge here and there. But for the most part, it was a reflection of where they were at, at a very top philosophical level. And I don't know that that's true. I think sometimes the people who have R's on they're not what I would call traditional Republicans. They're not even within what I think is a healthy big tent of the party. There's something very different, but they want to use that Republican brand to get elected. I'll tell you, Mike, I very much like the idea of a larger, instead of the Republican candidate being ostensibly chosen by a very small room of activists. I like the idea of the broader rank and file voters having a say.
Yeah, and you talk about tomfoolery with the current system we have. Like in our district, we have legislators from the Bosnia types out there trying to rally people to come to that meeting that night against us. And we know who they are, because how we know? The public tells us who they are. So you talk about tomfoolery, that's where a lot of that's happening. And not only in our district, there's other districts too, where there's sitting lawmakers in the Bosnia camp that are going around to all these districts, putting their nose in there, and then trying to get people there to take out that current incumbent.
Yeah. Well,
and that's been going on for a while, but I'm very surprised about how open they are.
Yeah.
Especially Representative Pritchard has not made any secret about that whatsoever.
You know,
And,
I wanted to ask about that because I've been writing. He's got this organization called Citizens Alliance, which is affiliated with this national group. In fact, one of his we're just the deadline for FEC filings for year end for 2023 is today. He made a filing last night for a federal PAC called Young Republicans, and he raised over six figures, over $100,000 for this. Some of the money coming from Republican lawmakers, and then donated all of that money to this National Citizens Alliance group. And then Brandon has sent out emails, Representative Pritchard sent out emails, saying that he's the executive director of the Citizens Alliance group. He sent one out that I wrote about not that long ago that was sort of targeting a couple of dozen, I forget the exact number, it was a couple of dozen of his Republican colleagues for voting against one of the trans bills. It was a bill restricting like pronoun use, stuff like that. He hit all these lawmakers for voting against it, failed to mention that most of the people he identified had voted for pretty much an identical bill. So it was a complete misrepresentation. But here I think what's remarkable is you have a sitting lawmaker who hasn't even completed one term in office. He's completed one legislative session. He's a sitting lawmaker. He's 22 years old. He's raising all this money to try to take out other Republicans. I mean, that is remarkable to me that that's happening right now. And it seems like there's really no outcry from Republican leadership. I mean, it's just happening, and I'm amazed by it.
Well, it's really unprecedented, Rob. And you're right about Republican leadership. It's not Republican leadership in the chamber, the legislative level, or even on the statewide level. It's the Republican leadership in the party who's quiet. And I can tell you past party leaders would have jumped in right away and had a talk and everything else. But I think their silence speaks volumes as far as where they stand on that issue. And I know people have complained about them only to find nothing has happened. In our district, we had this supposed public notice, which was an ad. It was a campaign ad. It's pretty obvious with a campaign ad. In fact, they even referenced in the Bismarck Tribune's opinion piece today about it. We talked to the party about it. And they talked about it in the executive session, and the leader of the party and some others said, no, that was a public notice, and others disagreed, and it's not. So, yeah, it's frustrating for people like us when you have the party leaders just kind of sit by quietly, knowing full well, the silence speaks volumes, and for them to do that. All I can say, though, Rob, with some of these younger Bakia types putting their nose in there and campaigning against the incumbents, is that when we come back, and we will come back next session, it's going to be a long session for those guys. They're pretty much going to have a really, really tough session. And nobody's going to take them seriously. You don't take a run at myself and my friends and not expect there's going to be some no payback. So they could have a tough session as far as willing to work with them, even listening to them. You just don't do that.
I wanted to ask you one last question. We were talking about what happened in your district, where you have, sort of your own district chair is running against you, and he's presiding over the competition that's going to establish who's the endorsed candidate is. That's why you ended up skipping everything. The North Dakota Monitor asked party chair Sandy Sanford about this, and this is a quote from the Monitor report. They said, Sanford said she was extremely disappointed to hear that Republican incumbents are not feeling welcome at in their own districts. Now, that's a good start, right? I was thinking, okay, well, they should be disappointed. The incumbents should feel welcome in their districts. But then she goes on to say this. She says, I quote, I would rather have seen those lawmakers show up to that district convention and defend their reason for being lawmakers. That would have been so much more preferred. And so she made it like the problem was the incumbents were opting out of a rigged process. And the problem wasn't the rigged process. The problem was that you guys opted out of it. I'm looking at that like you do not understand where the problem is. I don't know that whether you're a rank and file voter, you're a Republican incumbent, I don't know that we can have a lot of confidence that the political party, that the NDGOP under its current leadership can run a fair candidate selection process.
Well, and that's why we had asked him to step down. We had actually talked to Sandy Sanford, and she had told us that he agreed to step down if he got the nomination. he told the president he's not going to step down. I wasn't there, but the people that were there told me that they were. He not only ran the meeting, he had a gentleman from Minot come run the meeting.
Talking about Justice Amundsen, who's the district chair.
Yeah, Amundsen. So when it came time for the actual endorsement, he stepped aside and had his buddy from Minot come down and run this thing. And then he had his family members helping with the vote count and doing all those sorts of things. I mean, I got to tell you, Rob, if that was us doing that and they were on the other side, they would be screaming from here to high heaven. So you can't make it up. It wasn't fair. All those actions, Rob, solidified even more in my mind that we made the right decision not to go, because it would not have been fun for anybody. I think it would have been chaotic. We probably would have had to have a cop there again. The voting process, the meeting process, everything else was not run professionally. And quite frankly, I don't think it was a fair process whatsoever. Now, we weren't there, so they got nominated unanimously. But those are all the reasons. They just justified the reasons why we weren't there.
Mike, you're taking your case for the nomination process. You're taking your case to the broader electorate as opposed to just the few dozen people who are in the room at a district convention. What's the case you're going to make to them? Why re-elect the incumbents in District 30? What's your case to them?
Well, I've had the privilege of being elected 4 times in the past. Myself and Senator Larson and Representative Bosch all sit in leadership positions. Representative Bosch is assistant leader. Senator Larson's the chairwoman of the judiciary, and I'm the chairman of a subsection of House Appropriations. And we've been able to do a lot of good for Bismarck and for the state. We've been supportive of the income tax breaks, a lot of tax breaks, tax relief that we've done, the in-state investment bill of mine. Prairie Dog, which helps with the infrastructure cost that the property tax owner doesn't have to pay, that's used with oil money. We've done a lot of things along those lines. I was a co-sponsor on a bill to get rid of state income tax and all Social Security benefits. So all 3 of us have a long laundry list, Rob, of things that we have done for our district in these years that we have represented the district. And we listen to our constituents. And they've been very happy with in the past. Again, we are not perfect, and there may be some votes that people don't agree with, and I get that. When you vote 1,200 times a session, that is going to happen. But we have a long and proven track record of bringing results back to our constituents and the state of North Dakota, and the fact that we've been elected several times over proves that.
Mike, last question. This is, you mentioned, having run for re-election in the past, and obviously been successful at that. Due to term limits, unless I'm mistaken, this is the last time you can run, at least for the state house. I guess you could run for the state senate in the future if you wanted to, but under the term limits, even though the clock started ticking last year, you had all of last year. Your current term runs to the end of this year. If you're reelected, that'll be 4 more years. That'll put you at 6 years under term limits. The limit's 8, so you couldn't seek another term to the House. And there's a lot of other, incumbents right now who are in the same boat as you. Speak to that. How do you think that's going to impact politics in North Dakota?
Well, it's going to impact, if it stays the way it is, and I do think the term limit thing is still going to, I think that's a ways away from being resolved. By the way, you may see some bills that dealing with this, but you're exactly right. So all even numbered districts will only get 6 years, but yet the Constitution said that was passed that we should get 8 years. So how do you work that? So say I'm done after 28. Well, I want to run for 2 more. I want to run for 2 more years.
I feel like that question is going to end up in front of the courts.
Yeah. So and the term limit things. The term limit thing really concerns me, especially at 8 years. Imagine if that stays the way it is, and God forbid this property tax measure should pass. You're going to have lawmakers with 1 or 2 years of 1 or 2 sessions of experience now having to work with that property tax measure that's being floated out there. They're going to have to decide on all the budgets for the cities and counties and schools. And with that, they have no institutional knowledge, very little experience. And again, it all falls on the bureaucrats. It all falls on the lobbyists. What the public doesn't realize with that measure, what they did is they took power away from the people, gave it to the bureaucrats and lobbyists, and made the governor's office a lot stronger because they do have all the instruments and all the knowledge and everybody that they can tap for these issues to deal with. And the way it's set up right now, all the power is with the people because we're citizen legislators. We meet every other year.
Sure.
But that measure will be when people start cycling out, you start taking away that power and that from the people, and you're just transferring it to lobbyists, bureaucrats, and the governors. Nothing against the governor's office, but you're just giving them more authority.
Yeah, the intent is we're not besmirching the executive branch, which is staffed by a lot of fine people. But the thing is, our system of government has checks and balances for a reason, and I feel like, because we want tension between the branches of government. That's on purpose. That's how we want it to work. And I'm afraid that if we want checks and balances, what terms limits has done is create an imbalance. Anyway, that's all we have for today. So I really appreciate you coming on, Mike, and good luck.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, Rob. I always enjoy talking to you. Thanks so much. You have a great day.
Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.